So let's start with a bull and bear, but in this case a literal bull and a literal bear. What do they have in common? We could point out 4 feet, 2 eyes, heads ending in noses, but I want to focus on something more fundamental, something they have in common with us. They are alive. And as living things, they have certain needs which they act to meet. They look for food and water so that they can eat and drink. If they don't find and consume food, they die of hunger. If they don't find and consume water, they die of thirst. For the bull and the bear, food and water are values. They need to get them or they'll die. And that means they need to act to gain and keep those values. And dying of hunger or thirst isn't a matter of having something done to them. It's what happens by default if they don't do what they need to do, if they don't eat and drink. By eating and drinking, they give themselves the resources they need in order to live. This is what life fundamentally is, a process of taking actions in order to keep yourself in existence. And since that existence, that life is a process of acting, you can actually say that life is a process of acting to keep oneself acting. It's circular. The point of the actions that make up an organism's life is to keep that organism acting. And an organism keeps itself acting by means of gaining, keeping, and using the values it needs to keep itself alive. The action, for example, of an animal that kills its prey supplies it with a value, meat. Using that value supplies it with the energy and the nutrients that it needs to keep in motion and keep pursuing the values it needs. And part of that is identifying those values, picking up the things that are good to eat and drink in the case of a bull or a bear. But humans face a particularly complicated challenge. We need to figure out what sorts of things are good for us, not just what's good to eat. We need to figure out what to eat, how to get it, how to navigate our world, what other people to interact with, how to deal with it. We face a virtually endless list of questions about what values to pursue and how to pursue them. And in a way, we really face 2 sets of questions. First of all, we need to know what's good for human beings simply as human beings. For example, we need to know all human beings need food. We also need to know what's good for us in particular, as individuals. For example, I happen to be lactose intolerant. A hunk of cheese might be good food for you. Probably isn't for me. But of course, human needs are much more complicated than just the right food. For example, all human beings need a career, but the same career may not be good for you and for me. Each of us needs to identify a career that suits him or her. And we also need to recognize that as human beings, we do need some career or other. The understanding of value that I'm using here, I learned from the works of the philosopher Ayn Rand, who founded the philosophy Objectivism, which I and my colleagues at the Atlas Society study, develop, teach, and try to practice. Rand defined value in these words. Value is that which one acts to gain and or keep. Since value is something one acts to gain, any given value has to be a value to someone. Nothing is just a value hanging out in the air, not actually valued by or valuable to anybody. And if value is going to have meaning, if something's going to be rationally valuable, not just arbitrarily valued, it has to be valuable for some purpose. For example, my computer is valuable to me for writing things, among other purposes, and writing things is valuable to me, among other reasons, because it's part of how I make money, and I use that money to live. That chain of values, Valuing the computer to write, writing for money, money to live, illustrates a more general point. Ultimately, what anchors all one's values is the value of one's own life. Now, that actually raises a bunch of complicated philosophical questions. One might ask, what makes life valuable? Is life necessarily valuable even if you don't value it? I don't have time to get into all of that today, but if you are interested, I recommend Ayn Rand's essay, The Objectivist Ethics, and my own recorded webinar, Living for Yourself. You can find Rand's essay in her book, The Virtue of Selfishness, and you can find my webinar on the Atlas Society's website at atlassociety.org. Now, many organisms simply find the values they need already existing in nature. But human beings, to a unique extent, create the values we need. The building we're in, this building, even parts of this island itself, human beings create. And let's take a moment to acknowledge some of the remarkable values that people have created. They've created all sorts of electronics and computers, such as the tablet seen here. Created weapons, means of transportation, such as the bridge and the car seen here. What makes all of that possible is reason. Our ability to think, to understand reality, to understand how things work, and in light of how things do work, to figure out how things can work. That car is a Prius. Consider all the things that people had to figure out for that to be possible. Inventing the wheel, discovering oil, inventing the modern battery, studying aerodynamics. You and I probably can't even identify everything that went into that. But somebody had to understand each of them. Somebody had to understand how to fit all of them together, or the car would not exist. It is by the application of reason, as well as physical effort, that human beings create the values on which we live. And while I could trace any of those values, yes, even the weapon, back to their support of human life, let me point out that humans even create our food. For thousands of years, much, nowadays virtually all, of the food that we eat has been deliberately created by human beings. And the efficiency with which the modern American farmer creates food is made possible by the technology he uses. Technology such as that produced by Monsanto and John Deere. Even the food we eat is the product of human intelligence. Because the creation of most of this value is made possible by reason, there are intellectual values as well as physical ones. Knowledge itself is a value that we can produce, trade, and trade for when we buy books or take classes. Because we can create and obtain more values than just the food it takes to keep alive, every day can contain the achievements of the previous days and build on them. For example, if you make a tool, you have that tool to use in future days to produce more value. The same is true of intellectual tools. As you gain knowledge, you can use what you've learned not only to create other kinds of values, but to gain more knowledge, more intellectual values. And the more values you gain and keep, depending on what they are, the more they can contribute to your life, including to your creation of more values. But if you try to produce all the values you need for yourself, you'll have difficulty learning enough to produce more than a few of them very well. Indeed, you won't be able to produce any complicated values such as a Prius or a tablet. That's why we need to trade. By trading, each of us is able to gain the values others have produced in exchange for some of the values we produce. Perhaps the simplest form of trade is an exchange of one material good for another. And of course, course, we trade for services. That allows one person to gain the benefits of another's skills. For example, suppose you're a physician and I'm a lawyer. I actually am a lawyer, but not practicing. And I agree to handle your legal needs in exchange for medical care. You gain the benefits of legal knowledge, I gain the benefits of medical knowledge. Not, of course, with quite the reliability of knowing it oneself. And I could talk at some length about the virtue of independence, but not now. You do get, however, quite a lot of the benefit through that kind of trade. But when you exchange goods for goods, services for services, or goods for services, you still have a serious limitation. You can only trade with people who want the specific values that you produce, or the specific values that you trade for. For example, if your only real skill lies in building houses, and you need medical care, but all the doctors have houses already, you have a problem. That's apart from all the negotiating problems involved in bargaining for medical care in terms of house construction. The solution to that problem is money. Money allows you to produce value in the form of houses, trade for value in the form of medical care, even if there's no one who both wants a house and can provide medical care. What makes money valuable is that you can trade it for the work and product of others, productive others. Just the fact that people want money doesn't make it valuable. What makes it valuable is that people who create values that can contribute to your life are willing to trade those values for money. And so long as you can expect productive people to continue to want money, you can expect that money will continue to support your life. Thus, saving money is one way to make each day contain the product of the days before. If on previous days you've produced value and traded it for money, you still have the money, and that money is still valuable, then you still have the ability to get some value you want in exchange for the work that you've already done. The money you get for the values you create is a symbol, and indeed an embodiment, of the value that you have created in other people's lives. It means that you have done something that contributed to the life of someone else who's created value, and that you have traded this contribution to him in a way that can now contribute to your life. Making money, properly speaking, means creating value and getting money for it. In all these trades, and in the set of trades and traders that constitute a market, people approach each other with values too often. Things that can improve other people's lives. The question is, how can I make your life better in your own judgment? Now, in a lot of interactions that aren't trades, people offer threats instead. A mugger might kill you if you don't hand over your wallet. And when we have arguments over criminal law, we're arguing about the circumstances in which the government should make your whole life a whole lot worse by punishing you for violating some law. In trade, we offer each other values, and our bargaining power comes from how we can make each other's lives better. When you trade, you are seeking a value to make your life better. So you have a reason to look for the best values you can find in the market, the values other people have created or can create that will make the best contributions to your life. And the more value someone's product brings to your life, the more you'll be willing to pay for it in the context of your needs. Thus, the market rewards the best value creators. And the market gives us reason to wish others well, to want them to succeed. Because the more value others create, the more there is for us to earn in the market. For example, if no one had invented the smartphone and brought it to market, none of us could go out and buy one. These values of the market, this benevolence of the market, makes all our lives richer. And it's made possible, and indeed made necessary, by trading by means of money. I've been talking a lot about trade, but I want to pause now and take a closer look at the concept. A trade is an exchange of value for value to mutual consent. Exchange value for value, mutual advantage by mutual consent. The first part, value for value, should now be clear. You give the other person a value that you have created, or that you are creating, in exchange for some value that person has created or traded for. And that means you have a new value, one that contributes to your life. And your possession of it is the result of your having created the other value. So the value you receive in trade is still your achievement. You're still sustaining your life. And you're doing it by means of trade. In making a trade, you honor the fact that you are pursuing values for the sake of your own life, and the other person is pursuing values for the sake of his or her own life. That's because trades are exchanges to mutual advantage. In a trade, you're making a contribution to the other person's life, and you're doing it because it contributes to your life. A trade also honors the fact that every human being needs to figure out for himself what is valuable for him. Trade honors this need for independence because it rests on mutual consent. That is, each party must judge that the deal is in his or her interests, or there's no trade. Even in an honest stock trade, where the seller may well regret a sale if the price goes up and the buyer if it goes down, each party benefits from the opportunity to exercise judgment and pursue profit in the stock market. When you work with others as a team, that can be a form of trade. Each member contributes some value to the team's success. Each member gets some benefit from the team's success. If you participate in the team as a trader, you're doing it because you expect to make yourself better off by being part of the team than you could otherwise. There's an aspect of this in most jobs. Your work creates more value because it's done as a part of the organization in which you work, and it benefits from the work done by other members of the organization. So, for example, when I write an op-ed for the Atlas Society, someone else edits it, someone else sends it to newspapers, and other people do the fundraising that pays for me to write it. And trade isn't just limited to what we normally consider economic relationships. Consider friendship as an example. That's right, friendship as an example of trade. In friendship, you make yourself a valuable part of your friend's life in exchange for the value you find in having your friend in your life. Each of you is better off for that friendship. At least I hope so. I hope you would not be friends with someone if it made you worse off. Who wants friends that are going to make them worse off? Anybody? And who would want to find out that you were making your friend worse off? The friendship, then, is an exchange to mutual advantage by mutual consent. Now, I mentioned friendship. I could talk about romance, and I could talk about other things that we don't normally think of in the context of trade. Because I'm about to say something that is one of the more startling moral principles that Ayn Rand put forward. It is rational in the long run to seek values from others only by means of trade. Only by giving value for value by mutual consent to mutual advantage. Thank you. This is why I'm a philosopher. So there really, you do hear things in philosophy that are not obvious. So those who stayed through the things that you probably found obvious at the beginning, I hope you're finding a payoff here. So all good relationships are trading relationships, at least if they involve gaining value from the other person. By trade, you sustain your own life better than you could alone. By trade, you pursue your own values in your own life, and you do it in a way that makes you valuable to others rather than dangerous for others. When you live by production and trade, you create value, and that value benefits you. Since trade means exchanging value for value to mutual advantage by mutual consent, any alternative to trade, when it comes to gaining values from others, would have to be gaining value from others without giving value in return, or not to mutual advantage, or not with consent. Now, the most benign, non-trade way of gaining values is begging. Now, begging does involve one of the elements of trade. An honest beggar is getting his money by consent. But the beggar is asking the other person to give him something for nothing, and to do it with full knowledge that that's what he's doing. So the beggar does not sustain his own life, nor does the donor, because the donor is sustaining the beggar's life instead of his own. The beggar is being sustained by the donor instead of himself. But at least it's voluntary. It is important to distinguish begging from seeking contributions. For example, musicians often take contributions, and I sometimes contribute if I like the music. I contribute because I want those people to keep making music. I'm getting value there, even if it's value that I could get without contributing. In fact, if anything, the trader principle says I ought to contribute in such cases, because I'm getting value and I ought to pay for it. Voluntary scholarships are similar. It makes sense to donate to a scholarship fund only if you want students of the sort that that fund supports to undertake studies of the sort that the fund supports, even if those students don't have the money to pay for it themselves. Another alternative to trade is stealing. Here you simply take the value that another person has created. As in begging, you're not sustaining your life, the other person is doing it for you. But this time he's not doing it by consent. A beggar is not a threat. A productive person can simply ignore him. But a thief is a threat, because he might take the values that you've created. So people need to protect themselves against thieves, which is one reason it's a good idea to not become one. The third alternative is a twist on the second. You could try to obtain values from others by threatening them with destruction. That is, you could practice robbery instead of mere theft. As with the other two, coercion, it diverts the value your victim had created to support his own life to you. You're not supporting your life, he's not supporting his life, he's supporting yours. Now, normally, you might think about private coercion, such as a mother. But most people who gain value through coercion, at least in this country, do it through governmental coercion. They accept benefits paid for by taxes. Or they trade with people who are forced to trade with them, or denied other options. Now, the case here can be more complicated. Let's take a look, though, at one instance of government handouts, such as grants under the federal student aid programs. If you go and persuade the government to create a new benefit program to benefit yourself and people like you, then you are doing widespread harm to other people. If you merely accept a benefit that's already being given out to millions, you may not be harming anybody. But even in that case, you're gaining value you didn't produce. Even if by accepting benefits you don't harm anyone else, you're not sustaining your own life. The taxpayers are. And they're not doing doing it by their own judgment in pursuit of their own values. Governments decide it for them. That said, one might argue that that's not the case if overall you're putting more into the government than you're taking out. And I won't get into the complicated case of government employees, who on the one hand seem to be trading and on the other hand are being paid through taxation. The fourth alternative to trade is defrauding people. Now, fraud looks like trade, except that by deceiving the other person, you've prevented him from exercising his own judgment and caused him to lose by the deal. Thus, again, you divert the value he has created, the money he has made, from the support of his own life to the support of yours, and you fail to support your own life. Not only that, but the people easiest to defraud are the least perceptive people. And because people create value with their minds, those are the people who have the least to offer. You have to seek out the worst people instead of the best. Your relationships are undermined because you're not offering real value. For example, if you have a job you can't really do, but you got it through fraud, and your fraud's discovered, you're likely to lose it. And if you make someone love or respect you by deceiving him or her as to who you really are, that person doesn't love or respect the real you, only a fictional character that you created. The fifth alternative to trade, the last one I'm going to talk about, can also be understood as a form of trade. When you borrow money, you are trading a promise of future value for present value. If your promise to pay is valuable, if you can be expected to pay, then the lender really is getting something for his money. He's getting your promise to pay money in the future. And productive people do borrow all the time. Indeed, many trades involve incidental borrowing. If you get paid for your work at the end of every 2-week pay period, then you've essentially made a loan to your employer. If he pays you in advance, then he's essentially made a loan to you. And yet, in an important sense, borrowing is an alternative to trade. When you borrow money, that's value you haven't created yet. To the extent you live by that borrowing, you're not sustaining your own life. You're living today on the promise you'll sustain it tomorrow. Meanwhile, your creditor is sustaining your life. And whereas when you save money, each day contains the value created in the days before, when you're living on debt, each day contains the liabilities of the past. Now, if that's too metaphysical for you, consider a few more directly practical risks. It may turn out you can't make payments when they're due. You will certainly have other needs too, and even if you're willing to live frugally, your income may simply not be enough. But if you don't pay, you won't be able to borrow in the future, and even the assets that you have will be insecure. Creditors can go after them. Since this is a student event, I suspect you can guess what I'm about to talk about. This is what ought to be the symbol of the United States Department of Education. If there is any kind of debt that people tend to live on, it's student loans. That means while you are borrowing as a student, you are not sustaining your own life. You're promising to repay it, to sustain it retroactively when the time comes to pay it. You can't form a habit, or keep a habit if you already have one, of living within your means. Because the moment you take out a student loan, you give that up. That makes it harder to let yourself resist other ways of going into debt, such as building up a balance on your credit cards, even if you didn't plan to. And if we got off to a late start, so I actually have about 5 minutes to talk left. So the primary lender for student loans in this country is the Federal Department of Education. Hence why I say this ought to be their symbol. So you're borrowing from the taxpayers as a student loan borrower. And your low interest rate taxpayers. It takes a pretty long time to pay off a student loan. Federal loans can last for up to 25 years after you enter repayment, and that's without a default. During that time, they can make a lot of things harder or impossible. Marriage and children, saving for retirement, having a nice home, anything that you want to spend money on. And it's hard to escape them if you're having trouble paying them. Normally, if you have a debt you can't handle, you can get it discharged in bankruptcy. Student loans have protections against that. And people talk about the great asset that you get with a student loan. Well, here's the thing about education as an asset. You can't sell it off. If your mortgage is costing you too much, you can sell your house and one hopes pay off your mortgage that way. But you can't do that with your degree. And nowadays, even the value of that degree is coming into question. So since going to school for a number of years is a huge decision even without the issue of debt, and with debt it's even bigger, that is a question that you need to think clear-headedly about. And I'm going to skip over to something. Does anybody particularly want to hear a few words on morality of investing?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I've spoken a lot today about the use of money to support one's own life. Now you can do that, of course, by using your money to fund your own work. For example, starting a new business with the money you made in the last one, or starting a non-profit, as our host has done, with the money he made in a business. But another thing you can do with money that you have made is to invest in other people's businesses. That means using the value that you've created to enable other people to create value in exchange for a share of that value. Now, some people look askance at this. They don't see how the investor is creating the value. But in fact, the creation of value often requires a lot of value to start with. And what you are creating is being done with the value that you've already achieved. So the investor is supplying a lot of the value that enables that further creation. It's his past gains, as well as that of the operating executives and workers that are creating the present day. That brings me to my final topic. As I've said over and over, you need to pursue the values that sustain your life. But part of what makes your life possible is the right kind of society. A free society. A society where you can pursue the values that sustain your life. And that means that that sort of society, a free society, is itself a value. Like all values, liberty requires action to gain, to keep, to get back. But a free society can't be sold at retail. You can't buy just your bit of it for yourself. If you want a free society, the only way to earn it, to sustain your own life in that respect, is to put your effort into creating a free society, to making your society free. Now, one way to do that is to build a career in the cause of freedom, as I'm doing. Another way is to invest, to put some of the value that you create into the cause of liberty in the form of donations. Now, what I've given you in the past half hour is just a sample of the ethics and politics of objectivism, the philosophy of reason, self-interest, and achievement, founded by Ayn Rand and developed and promoted by my employer, the Atlas Society. If you want to learn more about objectivism and the Atlas Society, please ask questions, come to our website, talk to me during the break or after the conference, and I hope we do still have some time for questions. Thank you. Charles.
Yeah, what is a libertarian?
A libertarian. This is actually
This is something I know nothing about, by the way.
surprisingly disputed question. But a libertarian is somebody who is committed to a free society. A society based on individual rights. On your right to live your own life, pursue your own values. Somebody who should not control your personal life or your business.
Very similar to the graph.
Well, to define somebody as a maverick is simply to say that he doesn't follow some particular group, and somebody can say doesn't follow some particular principles. Libertarians do follow principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
As they define it.
That's correct.
As correctly defined versus as they define it.
Well, liberty does have a real meaning.
Liberty has a real meaning depending on your social group, your ethnic group, and how cultural you're raised.
No.
Respectfully
The
disagree.
meaning of liberty is being able to pursue your own values, your own life, without being violently impeded, without having force initiated against you to stop you from doing that. And that is true of you, it is true of me, that we need liberty in that sense, that is what liberty correctly identified is. And now, you can look at different people in different social contexts and say that some people's liberty is being violated in certain places. But that doesn't change the definition of liberty. That simply means that somebody's liberty is being violated. And according to libertarianism and according to objectivism, that's a problem. At least, absent some justification, such as the enforcement of rights and the person having violated somebody else's rights.
I see what you're actually saying to me is a matter of perspective.
No, I am certainly not saying that it's a matter of perspective.
Unfortunately, that's what I hear about perspective.
So,
That's okay.
it is, if you want to make the argument that it's a matter of perspective, that might be your position, but it is certainly not my position. My position is that there is a fact of the matter, and certainly I am not saying that everybody in the world is fully free. In fact, I would probably say that nobody in the world is fully free. Nor am I saying that everybody in the world is equally free. I am saying that every person who has not violated other people's rights has a right to be free. And it's the same right for all.
Here, I'm just speak.
Okay.
All right. So you define objectivism as value is that which one acts to gain and or keep. Correct.
That's the definition of value. Is that which one acts to gain?
All right. Well, that's the definition of value. Fine. Value is that which one acts to gain or keep. Right. That's your argument. You made this entire presentation saying that trade is how we can gain value.
Is a way of gaining value in a very important way.
And what I'm confused about that is trade basically takes money off the table. Trade is not a frictionless thing. When you are trading, what you're actually doing is you're creating an average. You're saying when someone will pay X amount for this, basically something has value that is intangible, so to speak. Correct?
I'm sorry, I'm losing track of everything you're saying.
All right. Let me simplify this. Why you made an argument for trade, right?
Yes.
But trade in this, and you said that trade is better than stealing.
Yes.
Why is trade better than stealing when the true idea is trade is to gain or keep? Isn't stealing then better to gain or keep than trading?
So let me see if I get the question right.
Yeah.
You are proposing that it is better to steal than to trade,
Yeah.
on the ground that you gain more value from stealing. So, for example, if I steal this laptop that's sitting in front of me,
You gain.
I gain the laptop.
Yeah.
If I trade for it by paying the appropriate price, then I am gaining less. I am gaining only the difference between the value of the laptop and the value of the money.
Exactly.
Well, okay, if I steal, I'm losing the difference between the value of the laptop and the value of my freedom if I get caught, and the value of being able to say where my laptop came from, and the value of not being a threat to every productive person I encounter, and the value of
But is it really
developing the virtues and the person rather than a thief. As a matter, so seems to me that the trade is that stealing is the much worse trade-off, so to speak. Moreover, there is also that point about sustaining my own life. If I am stealing, then I am not sustaining my life because the laptop isn't the result of my effort. It's the result of Josh's effort or whoever's this laptop is.
So you're saying that stealing does not enable value to exist?
Well, that's also true. I mean, stealing does not create value. Stealing, if anything, destroys value.
I disagree, but that's...
You disagree. Why? I'm here to explain philosophical points. So if you disagree, tell me why you disagree, and let me see if I can set you right about it.
I'm going to let this gentleman answer his question if he needs to, and then we'll talk about it.
Well, Alex, you know me of all people, if ever you give me the most educated, most respectful questions on the planet, so let me begin. Is Karl Marx a libertarian? I must know this, because I have no idea. No. Okay. You answered for me. She stole your spot. Get down. She stole. Give her the laptop also.
Let it be known for the record that that's not stealing.
Take when he was too slow to get.
Is that Karl Marx is not a libertarian. Now,
Why not?
Does that mean Joseph Stalin's not either?
yes, Joseph Stalin, not a libertarian, because what they are proposing to do is to say, you can't go and pursue values. We're going to take over all the values. We're going to tell you what to do. And that is pretty much the opposite of libertarian.
No, that's...
Okay, this is a serious question.
That's just how...
Actually, this was serious. I'm going to just think that actually. Okay, Paul Ryan claims to be an objectivist. Is he a liar?
Well, actually, Paul Ryan does not claim to be an objectivist. Paul Ryan claims to have been inspired in some points by Ayn Rand. I suppose he might be inspired on some points by Ayn Rand. He is also, on a lot of points, very much not inspired by Ayn Rand. I mean, the man believes in bailouts. The man believes in restricting people's freedom for in their personal lives. The man. There are a lot of things that the man believes that are contrary to objectivism.
I still think he'd make a better Robin than that man.